Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining us today for our webinar, which is based on our white paper, Customer Voice Within Social Housing. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Dave Russell and a Principal Consultant here at Neymar Search, specifically within our interim practice. And I am delighted to be joined by my guests, Rachel Crownshaw, who is the Group Managing Director of Communities over at Places for People, and Katie Finch, who is the Business Services and Assurance Director at Citizen. So just before we go into the session today, a few ground rules or a couple of ground rules. As you can see and tell already, you are all muted. So in order to make sure things flow well, if you could remain that way, that would be great. However, we do have a Q&A and a chat function. So please do ask away any questions. The more that you engage in this, the better everything will be. So I suppose just to jump into, the reason why we're here and the reason that we did the white paper. Neymar Search is an executive search organisation that specifically is embedded within the housing sector itself. So we're speaking to executives and customers from across the sector constantly. And the key driver is that what we were finding from the conversations we were having, and certainly one of the key themes within the communities that we run, is that customer voice, fine, we might be able to get the level of feedback that we want, but is it actually being embedded across the culture of housing associations? So in really going out and doing the research that we wanted to do, we interviewed over 100 different people and their chairs and executives from across the sector. In terms of the types of people that we were interviewing from an executive perspective, that can be anything from property, finance, customer experience, HR, IT, because we really wanted to get a flavour for how customer voice sits within those different teams and what it actually looks like to these the different teams there. So with that, what we found was there was a few key themes that really came off the back of that, and that's really what we're going to be discussing today. So first of all, I mentioned around feedback. Do we have an issue with that? So that'll be the first thing that we're discussing. Secondly, customer voice, is that becoming more of a governance issue? And finally, we'll move on to best practice and what we're seeing there, and hopefully give you some valuable insights there into what that looks like. So before I hand over to Rachel and Katie, I thought I'd ask a question to all the participants that are joining us today, and really just get a flavour of where you are at the moment. So if you want to pop your answer into the chat function, I suppose, what is a big challenge, or rather, what is the biggest challenge your organisation is facing when it comes to customer voice? Is it 1, collecting insights, 2, analysing insights, 3, acting on insights, or 4, measuring impact? So just to repeat that, what is the biggest challenge your organisation is facing when it comes to customer voice? Is it 1, collecting insights, 2, analysing insights, 3, acting on insights, or 4, measuring impact? So whilst you're answering that question, I will hand over to our guest today. Starting with you, Rachel, I suppose it'd be great if you could introduce yourself to everybody involved, and I suppose give us an insight into the challenges that you're facing over at Places for People.
Great, thanks, and good morning or good afternoon now, everybody.
Oh, sorry, Rachel.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine now, yeah.
Okay, fab, cool. So yeah, really nice to be joining you this afternoon. I'm Rachel Crownshaw. I'm the Group Managing Director for Communities at Places for People, which means I oversee the housing management services across the 86,000 properties, social housing properties that we have nationally. I've spent the past 7 years in executive leadership roles in housing, leading merger integrations, reshaping services, and driving cultural and service transformation. Before joining the sector, I worked across banking, retail, utilities, and it's given me a really rich perspective of different sectors, their approach to customer services, and involving customers in shaping improvements. Outside of my role, I'm an independent member of the Riverside Customer Experience Committee, a board member at PFP Thrive Academy, and a vice president of the Institute of Customer Services, where I get to spend time with people from across different sectors. So that helps to broaden my insight outside of the sector. So I think it's safe to say that customer voice, customer service is something that really gets me interested and passionate. So really lovely to join everyone this afternoon. I think in terms of current challenges at PFP, and I think it's probably shared looking at the answers that people have given in terms of your original poll, Dave, lots of them are number 4, which is again what we're grappling with. It's that impact piece, and it's interesting actually, because looking at the language that we use, we kind of use customer feedback, customer voice, customer insight interchangeably, a bit like customer service and customer experience, and they're not quite the same thing. They're interrelated, but they're not the same thing. And I think we have become good as a sector at collecting feedback, which is largely transactional and in nature, and quite passive. But it's a bit like, we talk about in leadership, we talk about the feedback sandwich. There's a bit of a sandwich with feedback in the middle, where before feedback you've got customer voice, and then afterwards you've got impact. So there's a kind of virtuous cycle there. So if I bring it to life a little bit, in a restaurant, you could just say, how was your meal today? And it was a good, bad, indifferent, etc. That's feedback. Voice is around kind of understanding why people chose the restaurant that they've gone to, or what makes them feel welcome, what kind of experience do they value. And then the impact is, how have you made them feel afterwards, and how has that contributed to what they were celebrating, for example. So I think that challenge is one that we're embarking on in PFP. And I'll happily talk a bit more later around kind of what I mean by this, but we've just recently started doing keeping in touch visits, which are annual face-to-face visits with all of our customers to build relationships, restore trust, and try to understand a bit more about their lives. That's where we'll move to the next stage, which is understanding impact on their lives. So through understanding what their feedback is, understanding more broadly what's important to them, and then being able to shape recommendations and services accordingly, which gives us that impact.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much, Rachel. Katie, again, if you'd like to introduce yourself and let us know a bit more about the challenges you're facing over at Citizen.
Thank you. That's quite an introduction I need to follow there, Rachel. Thanks for that. Katie Finch, as Dave's already introduced, I'm Director of Assurance and Business Services at Citizen. I've been housing 17 years. I also spend time as a non-executive director as well, and I've been a chair previously of other organisations. So I kind of see it from both sides. I see it from the board side and also from kind of like the officer side as well. I'm just going to put my earphones in. Apologies, I've got builders here. Just what you need when you're in the middle of a session. 1 second, like real life. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'll carry on. So, 7 years, considerable amount of that time working sort of data space, insight space, and sort of setting up frameworks for customer feedback. And also with my role now, I'm the lead for governance at the organisation as well. So how we've embedded customer voice through our governance structures as well. I think challenges that Citizen have and have had is sort of consistency. I would start with the word. It might be a word I use quite a lot. And Rachel sort of picked up that one, consistency about terminology and what that means for the organisation. We use a lot of things interchangeably. It's not helped by the sector because we use things like resident, tenant, consumer and customer. And I do think actually all of those mean slightly different things. They also mean very different things to us as a sector as well. And I think sometimes we're trying to be all things to all people. One times we're trying to be customer experience and lead for kind of customer experience. And where do we benchmark ourselves against those in terms of, are we looking at commercial organisations like utility companies, of which sort of we're consumers of, versus then trying to think, well, we're a people organisation because we're housing and we forget that actually the human behind that. Then we try to become tech companies and trying to do all this fancy AI stuff. So I think it's sometimes not very consistent with sort of what we're trying to achieve, and we think we need to nail that a little bit more. And that's something I think Citizen is trying to do. The other big thing, given that you're sort of an executive search team, which I wanted to sort of bring up, is about skills and capability. And I think the bit that we sort of have attention with is that, yes, we can nail the analytics bits. We sort of worked on that and got that quite to a solid sort of skill set within the organisation. But I don't think us as an organisation or as a sector, we're quite data mature enough to sort of translate and sort of the capability wider in the whole organisation. And what I mean about data maturity is that it's everybody's business data. The way we've sort of translated safeguarding in our organisations is that everybody gets safeguarding. You know, you get your operative to go into a home and they understand, or they've sort of had it ingrained in them what safeguarding means and what their job is. I don't think we've quite got that with data, or sort of that skill set. Is that when an operative goes into a home and is putting something in their PDA wrong, which is what they can do, the impact that can have in the business in terms of how we deal with information and manage information. So I think I'm sort of going around sort of different kind of aspects here, but I think a skills and capabilities and a sort of a culture of data is something that we're sort of grappling with at Citizen. And I think that can really massively impact how we deal with that 1 to 4 sort of list that you gave us about, well, where are you on that scale? Because you can get all the thumbs on the seat to do the analysis. But it also, I think, number one's quite a big thing for a lot of organisations because of that consistency of the collection, and understand why you're collecting it and what you're collecting it for. You know, and I'm sure Rachel has sort of spoken about the fact that we haven't got a problem with volume. And I think most people on this call would say we haven't got a problem with volume. You know, we're soliciting 200,000 like transactional surveys a year. You know, there's definitely not a problem with volume. But we're not necessarily universally seeing sort of TSM scores kind of going in a direction. They are going up. They are getting better, I think, consistently, but we're not necessarily seeing transformational sort of change in sort of kind of that perception of customers. I'll leave it there. I'm conscious that we've got 45 minutes to get through. So, but that's my
great.
sort of start off.
No, that's a great start for 10. So thank you very much for the insight there. And just before we hop into discussing the first topic and looking at everybody's answers, it does feel like actually acting on insights and measuring the impacts of those is the key issue, really, for a lot of people. A lot of 3s, a lot of 4s, and a lot of 3 and 4s, interestingly. So, hopefully, today we can help in discussing that with you as well. So, first of all, and obviously you both touched on this already. We're going to be discussing feedback, and it feels like what we're all saying is that we don't necessarily have issues with actually collating the data. I mean, there's different routes to getting that with, you know, the TSMs, various different surveys that organisations put out as well, complaints, different scrutiny panels, and things like that. But I suppose, really, how do we turn the numbers into a narrative is probably the key question. So, first of all, coming to you, Rachel, I suppose, how are you ensuring the customer insights are evolving from a reporting requirement into a meaningful driver for operational change?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier about kit visits, keeping in touch visits, and you know, that's, I suppose, from one perspective it's transactional because you are measuring how many keeping in touch visits you do and whether you're doing them on an annual basis and whether you need to do them more frequently with customers. But actually, having got into the rhythm of doing the kit visits, of sending community housing managers out to go and have those conversations with customers, we're now moving to, and what is the nature of that conversation, and what do you learn from that conversation, and what's the quality of that conversation like? And they aren't necessarily, the skills required to get a really, really good quality conversation aren't necessarily skills that we might have recruited CHMs or community housing managers, housing officers, whatever you call them in your organisation, to do. They do this they did this in banking when I worked in banking really well after the banking crisis, where they did something called individual reviews, where the idea was sales through service. So rather than just trying to sell and point spent prizes, which was, you know, absolutely not the right way to to serve customers. It was around having a meaningful conversation about that customer's life, what's important to them, what their future holds for them, and making some recommendations as to how you can help. We started with looking at, okay, so what are our customers telling us? Rather than saying you've had a keeping in touch visit, what did you think of that visit, which is the feedback bit. It's what do customers think of us and what's important to them. So we did a survey through a mechanism that we've got at PFP called the listening room, where we have customers signed up to do lots of different surveys, and they can submit feedback freely, not necessarily in response to a survey, they can just submit feedback or thoughts or ideas. And we had about 4,000 responses, and the question we'd asked is, what does community mean to you? Because we're embarking on a journey to become have the look and the feel from a customer perspective of a community-based housing association, despite the fact that we're national. So we needed to ask the question, what does community mean to you? And like I said, we've got 4,000 responses, and it gave us a really rich source of ideas and feelings and feedback around what that means in practice, how that's lived out. And one of the things that was really consistent was to know my housing manager, to see them regularly in the community, to be able to talk to them about things that are important to me, and to have that relationship. So we knew that then it gave us the confidence, at least, that having an annual visit with a customer to build that relationship in the community would be the right thing to do. So the next piece is, what insight do we get? What's the quality of that conversation? How do we put that information into our systems so that it can then create insight and help direct us to where that impact will be felt the greatest? So the obvious one being vulnerable customers. So might we want to go and see them on a 6 monthly basis rather than 12 monthly, or might we want to go and see them on 3 monthly basis, or what is it about their life and their interactions with us as an organisation that might trigger us to want to go and proactively touch base with them and check in?
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. And that's, to be honest with you, to go into, I suppose, the white paper itself, I mean, looking at that as and trying to pick up different ways of going about collating the data as well. I mean, one of the things that we found around triangulation as well was that, I suppose, there was an example of a Midlands-based organisation that I suppose found that their damp and mould was rising, and the complaints were rising in what they were doing, and using the complaints records and I suppose the repairs logs, and I suppose what they were finding is that they were really struggling to where the complaints were coming from was their older low EPC houses. So using that data, they're able to effectively manage that better. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting way of going about things. And I suppose with that as well, I mean, looking at customer feedback, how is that directly influencing the service delivery on the front line, are you finding?
So we're in early days of doing the kit visits. We've been live for about 6 months now. So that triangulation is our kind of next level. It's the measuring the impact. So by having a conversation with a customer now around and identifying that they are hoarding, and then putting support in place, how do we measure over a longer period the impact that's had on their life? Or through identifying an issue with damp and mould sooner than we might otherwise have identified it, because we wouldn't have necessarily gone to see that customer, or the customer might not have reported it. How have we helped influence or impact their life for the better? So I think that's the bit that we're grappling with, but we're just about to start a pilot where we're going to look at a couple of a control group and a non-control group, where we look at 3 areas across the UK, just literally go hard at those areas, and collate as much information as possible, and from the nature of the conversations, what we've learned, and then turn that into what does that mean, and what does that mean for our service proposition, and how do we then evolve it. And we'll involve customers in that process as well. And I think that's the thing that we have worked on really hard over the past couple of years at PFP, and it was something that the regulator highlighted when we went through our regulatory assessment for the consumer standards, was just that relationship between our national customer group, our regional customer groups, and how we involve them in the scrutiny and the shaping of our services.
Fantastic. And Katie, similarly on your side, obviously this is an area that you're looking at yourself as well. So I suppose, how's it affecting things on your side?
Similar in some respects. I suppose we're at kind of the same kind of crossroads as well as Rachel. So we also undertake tenancy management checks, which are called like the same as yourself kits. And that's where I came to the kind of consistency thing at the start, that we're collecting all this information, but through very different mechanisms. And it's about how do we sort of bring that together to actually do some and take some action. We are finding the tenancy management checks are being very effective. They're kind of bringing us sort of closer to the customer and improving some of our TSM scores in terms of listening and acting. But what we've got to be careful is that we're not trying to do everything with one visit as well, and managing the expectations of what that is. And I think what we tend to do in housing is that we have lots of great ideas and we try to execute them all in one time. And what are we trying to change? Something that we've done just to sort of pick up on that is that, again, I came back to that consistency with the TSMs. And again, we've had 3 years worth of our TSM scores now. They just give you sort of a can opener. And I think we all know that. They sort of are never designed to be an insight function. They are just basically giving the regulator a benchmarkable position across all of the sector, really, about sort of where we all stand on a particular metric. That's all they do, really, in my opinion. So we've taken on some additional research, and we took one piece of our TSM scores, which was saying communal areas weren't particularly well thought of. We've got a lot of blocks, low rise, high rise in our portfolio. So we just took that one. Keep it simple is what I would say. I think we try and do too much. We sort of exhaust ourselves with trying to achieve lots of different outcomes and measure lots of different things. So we took that one piece of negative feedback and we said, right, we're going to do some research, some much more specific research on that. And what we've done is obviously we've commissioned some additional research on the top of that, which is telephone surveys and also web surveys, to understand what is driving that particular issue with communal areas. And what we've now got to is something called a hierarchy of needs. We've all heard about, is it Maslow's hierarchy of needs? We've got very small scale, really local level hierarchy of needs for some different areas. Now, one of our areas is called Hillfield. If you live in Coventry or you're from that area in the Midlands, it's a very challenging area that we operate in. From kind of an iterative process of working with that area, knowing that the big issue for them was in their blocks is that people going in terms of people who don't live in the area, using the key fobs to go in there. So safety and security was their fundamental basic thing that they wanted. Their basic need is to drive their improvement was that just sort the fobs out and people coming into our blocks. Start simple. We've now got a score, an individual score, and keep the metrics consistent and the same so you can track it from the start to finish, of 81% satisfaction in that area. Just that little area alone, which was incredibly challenging and taking up a lot of resource, because customers have said, we don't like this happening in our area. Put some CCTV in, deal with the key fobs issues, and we'll sort it. We know there's other areas where speaking to a neighbour might be the driver for their area in terms of the driving need, that they're lonely, the demographic means that they want to have interaction. So I've got a colleague on the call, probably that colleague on the call will go, let's do some engagement work in there. Don't do engagement work where you've got high ASB and nobody likes their neighbour, because the results are going to say you're wasting your time there. So I think it's about sort of really keeping things quite simple. And a bit like Rachel does, we've done some randomised control trials, really basic, really simple. Do text messages improve your arrears scores? If you do a randomised control, it will tell you statistically it does. Okay, well, we do text messages now, proactive text messages. We've been doing it for years. It increases your arrears collection. It's just basic things, small fundamental sort of research and insight to start kind of chipping away. I think what we try and do is having these very grand plans of improving insight and research and measuring lots of different things. Keep the measurements simple, keep them consistent, and you will slowly start to see and chip away at some of those sort of results coming through. But I think it's just about being very dedicated to sort of that plan and not being distracted by some of what I call the magpie effect in housing. Oh, they're off going doing over that over there. We're going to start doing that. And I think if you can keep your colleagues, your board is a big one, getting the board buy-in and your customer sort of bought into what you're trying to achieve, you will get there and you will start seeing results. But like I said, we've only started to see that after 3 years of TSM results. So for me, it's about sort of that application of being sort of disciplined with that sort of result and the time, and being patient with it as well.
Excellent stuff.
Now, Dave, can I just comment what something Katie said actually is I'd written in my notes, Katie, that phrase "can open." I remember the regulator using that a few years ago around kind of TSMs or any kind of metric should be a can opener to then look into it more, and absolutely is the case. If you look at repair satisfaction, for example, it could give you a percentage, but it doesn't tell you whether the customer feels safe in their home or whether they feel that they're living in a decent quality home. It doesn't tell you if they're financially vulnerable, but what it does do is it gives you somewhere to look at. And Katie's mentioned, and the report talks about feedback in itself, the volume of feedback not being an issue. There's still feedback there. It's about looking at it in a different way, slicing and dicing it, like that, the classic kind of pivot tables. Take the existing feedback you've got and just have a look at it in a different way. One of the things that we've looked at in our TSM scores, for example, which aren't where we want them to be at all, but they were giving us a view. But then when we looked at how representative they were of our entire customer base, some customers are more inclined to pick up the phone or to respond to a survey on an email than others. And we've benefited from the expertise of Naomi Sweeting, who a number of people who will know on this call, where we've done the psychographic segmentation. And what it's helped us to do is try to design our services or design the way that we approach feedback in a way that suits the most vulnerable people. And that has led us to go, look, let's just change how we approach our TSMs completely. Let's just air all of the issues that are possibly there, and let's ask the most vulnerable as well as those who would normally engage with us what their views are, so that we can do something with it. It's more about having something tangible that we can go at to try and make that meaningful difference.
Absolutely. It's a really interesting point to touch upon then, because I mean, there's a section of the white paper which is focused on the silent customer, and a lot of organisations really struggling to, well, firstly know whether that's the type of person that they that they need to reach out to, and as well as that, whether or rather how they go about engaging that person, or whether that person actually wants to be engaged, because if they're happy, the consensus seems to be is why would they reach out to us and get involved with us in that way. And I think segmentation in the way that you discussed it there, Rachel, is a really interesting insight into how that might work and improve things on that side. Great stuff. Excellent. So just I suppose keeping the conversation going, because I think we again, an hour is beginning to feel like quite a short space of time, and we can discuss this all day. But I suppose moving on to the next section, which is, I suppose, how customer voice is becoming a governance issue. I suppose just before going on that, just a reminder to everybody involved, if you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat feature. We'll do our best to come back to you and answer those as well. So with regards to, I suppose, governance, Katie, I suppose, how has customer voice evolved into a governance issue?
Quite a lot, really. And I think partly that's to do with the fact that we are led as a sector and as an organisation by the regulatory expectations of us. We aren't always led by the sort of like the innate sort of competition to have to do that because we've got profits and shareholders, etc. So we're getting there, but I think it's been sort of because of things like the consumer standards that come in. And I think for the organisations that are a little bit further ahead of probably would just before the consumer standards sort of start to say, you need to be doing this because they want to see that thread through governance. And again, coming back to sort of how you're seeing it as good governance in the sector, I think you see good governance for customer voice as sort of structured in a way that's particularly because governance is a structured sort of area. You can't sort of be scatty with it. You have to sort of go, what are they receiving on a regular basis that provides them that structure, that provides them that thread. Consistent, again, how often are they going to receive something? It's not just a TSM paper once a year and go, there you go, job's good, and that's your customer voice. The other thing is that thinking of being a board member, I'm a board member and I go to the board a lot, is that it's got to lead to outcomes and decisions. So what are you asking your board to do? So when you're taking customer voice, they get loads of other information on financial matters, risks and etc. And it leads to them to have to make a decision or be informed about something. So what are we trying to lead the board to do when you present that information first and foremost? Is it about going, we need more investment in something? Like, looking at it going, our customers are just not happy with communal areas. Okay, so what? They're not. Well, actually, we need a shed load of investment to do that. So that budget setting that we're going to bring to you later in the year, the reason why we've put an extra 3 million in is because we want to invest in our communal areas because the customer voice has told us that. So it's about being really clear, I think, with board about that. And that's, again, about the difference between the accountability and the responsibility. If anybody governance bod on here is going, what are the board accountable for in terms of the customer voice? And who's going to be responsible for executing that decision and that information that they're getting? The other thing as well about customer voice in the board room and sort of good governance around it is about not just making it metrics. I said about the fact that as a housing, we're a human organisation, we're about people. Everything we do is about people. Humanise the insight, make it relevant. They don't want to just see numbers because that just sort of like desensitizes some of the really significant challenges that we deal with as day to day as an organisation and as a sector. So an example of how we bring that to life, it isn't sophisticated, but our CEO reports every time he takes one every board meeting, has a case study. Might be a good case study, might be a bad case study. It's not always about giving them the good things. It's about saying sometimes we deal with some really challenging ASB cases or some domestic violence situations or some other really great things that have happened, some areas where they've had investment and this is the feedback. But humanise that voice and find opportunities to do that across the business, not just in the boardroom as well, because it isn't all about the data, because data is really important, but data won't bring to life some of the problems or some of the sort of the good things that you've got. So from a governance perspective, for me, the sort of takeaways I would say is keep it consistent, keep it structured, provide clarity, but humanise the voice in the room.
Excellent stuff. And I suppose from Rachel, your side, what are you guys seeing on your side, and how are you bringing customer voice to life when it comes to the board, coming to governance as well?
Yeah, I think the original question you were asking, Katie, was around kind of the how why customer voice is important in governance, and it kind of my answer leads from that, because the most obvious answer to that is because we've now got the consumer standards regulation. So it's naturally, whether you like it or not, it's now really important, if it wasn't important before to you. But regulation shouldn't be the reason you do something. You've got to do it for the right reasons first. But if anyone was under any of us were under any misunderstanding that it wasn't important, the consumer standards really made that and the regulation made that important. And I think general culture across the business, it plays a really, really important role in this. Katie's referred to ensuring that customer voice is and customer feedback and insight is shared at all levels across the organisation. And I think that comes through in the culture as well. And boards should be really, really interested in the culture of a business, of any business, and they are becoming increasingly interested in culture. So our board is really interested in our big colleague survey results, which is what we do every year. We do big colleague survey, and it's 3 best places to work, but it gives them assurance around the quality of leadership and the understanding of the messages and strategy, how people feel about working at Places for People, and what things might need to change in order to keep our people engaged and motivated to do the right thing for our customers. And I think it also comes through in our policies and our processes as well, around, that permission to go outside of our policies and processes. It's something we talk about a lot, is about, running through the line, and just, I think Greg, our CEO, talks about jumping off the raft. That actually, someone's got to jump off the raft at some point, if they feel like we're not doing the right thing. So just going back to that nature of being human, everyone should be behaving in a human way. The processes, the policies are literally just guardrails, and our people are very much encouraged to do the right thing, even if it's someone else's wrong thing. Because we can review it afterwards, and decide how we might do that differently next time. And with that in mind, we do these things called black box reviews, within teams, but also in sort of more senior council meetings, within our homes committee, at the board as well. And there really are some squeaky chair moments where, a customer story is presented to you, as a group, and you've got board members, you've got customers in the room as well as people from across the business, and you just want to sometimes just put your head in your hands and you think, how on earth how did it get to this? And unless you can look from that kind of aerial view at the whole end-to-end situation and all the interactions that you've had with that particular case and with that customer, you can't then start unpicking what went wrong. And again, the culture is such that it's okay, it's gone wrong, we're not happy about it, but this gives us the opportunity to get a load of eyes on it from different perspectives, and then change our policies as a result, or do some training as a result, or speak to relevant people within teams to coach them or develop them. Whatever it is, it's a collective failure if a customer situation ends up in in some of the ways that are presented in those black box reviews. But those are seen by board members. Board members are very keen to get involved in those, as well as senior leaders. So I think that's part of the assurance as well, is seeing that the organisation is alive to the fact that things will go wrong. And in an organisation, in any organisation, but an organisation operating at the scale that we are at PFP, with a number of customers, we will get things wrong, because also the touch points across lots of different teams. There's lots of touch points for one customer journey, which is maybe less an issue when you're a smaller organisation. You've got a bit more control.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And the customer journey is something, again, that obviously comes up a great deal in the white paper itself. And I suppose with regards to the governance piece, and when it comes back to boards, what we were seeing, I suppose, with the key issues that people wanted to raise were around, I suppose, the independent scrutiny panels and making sure that they had the credibility and transparency necessary. A hybrid model of going out there and looking at different ways through different committees, and again the scrutiny panels themselves to engage in a wider governance model. So I suppose past that as well, lived experience, and how can you get people with lived experience onto your board? How can you go about, I suppose, training them up? So a lot of people using TPAS, HDN, and pushing people through that route. But those were the key, some of the key issues rather we found on our side as well. We do have a question from Louise. So what are you doing differently on culture for the competence and conduct standards? We'll go to you first, Katie.
Oh, that's a big question. So yeah, we're aware obviously of that coming through, and going to be obviously sort of legislative next year, or later this year. Sorry, I think we're actually conducting at the moment a culture audit. It was requested by our board that they wanted to understand a little bit more about what culture means at Citizen. We've just started our new business strategy from this year, for 4-year strategy, so it was a bit of a baseline, really, to be honest. Because I think with the competency conduct standard, it's obviously great, and again, it's something that the legislation and the consumer regs are saying, you must do. But again, good organisations should already sort of know what competencies and good conduct looks like. And it's also, for me, quite narrow. It sometimes just looks for the kind of more sort of housing professional side, when actually when you're thinking about it wider, the whole organisation is everybody. You know, it's corporate services, it's development, or if you're developing organisation, it's much wider than just housing professionals and some of the others professions on the side of that. So for us, yes, coming back to the question and not being a politician here, we're doing an audit. It's not sort of like, you know, what it says on the tin, where it's really sort of robotic in terms of counting beans like auditors, or if there is any auditors on here, it is a little bit more exploratory than that. We're working with psychologists who sort of worked in sort of that kind of space before, about sort of understanding sort of the very, you know, it's very nebulous, isn't it? What does culture mean to everybody? It's subjective, and they have to look at quite a lot of different ways of understanding what that means to us. They've done surveys, they've done sort of workshops, etc. We're just halfway through that. It's sort of going to be presented back. In the same time, we're also sort of creating a framework of sort of competencies and conduct that we require at Citizen. We've done a lot of groundwork, though, I would say. So we've already had sort of good groundwork on things like, you know, training and behaviours and values, and I think it starts with that. If I'm totally honest, your competency and conduct starts with sort of the values base that you've got as an organisation, and then making those tangible. What do they mean to you as an organisation? What does that look like in terms of behaviours every day? And again, for me, it's the big thing I always say, that we're very good at putting words on paper and strategies and frameworks. It's, you've got to translate it. You've got to get the buy-in at the board, and then you've got to make sure that translates right down to the people who are, you know, your cleaners, your operatives. It's how you sort of bring that to life every day for them and what that means. And how do you measure it? Again, how do you measure whether that's successful? And again, we sort of talked about that in terms of the measurement piece, but nothing too sort of kind of what I would say rocket science in it, kind of keeping it simple again, but we're starting with sort of some external independence in terms of what culture looks like for us, and I hope that helps answer it.
Oh, thanks, Katie. Rachel?
I think I've kind of touched on a couple of these already, around kind of the trying to our strategy is around becoming closer to our customers, being a community-based housing association, but at scale. And there's two important pillars, three pillars, but two particularly relevant ones in terms of culture, is around bringing that decision making closer to customers. So empowering our frontline teams, particularly our community housing managers, to hold, you know, the responsibility for that customer relationship, but to have a team of experts around them in the local area to call upon to make decisions. And if they make the wrong decision, then they make the wrong decision. That's okay. You know, like I said, we learn from that. So we very much encourage that. So decision making close to customers. We've put our money in our hand in our pockets and spent £2.5 million on putting more community housing managers on the front line to reduce portfolio sizes, so that they can get closer to our customers and closer to communities and make those decisions themselves. And also, we've really focused on that team of teams approach. So as a large organisation, we have, you know, one team that looks after housing management, one team that looks after repairs, another team that looks after assets. Then they're not in the same kind of reporting line. But actually, what we've been working on is that shouldn't matter. The reporting line doesn't matter. It's around who is in your circle locally. If you're a community housing manager, who is it? Who is your person, your named person that you can go to if you've got a repairs issue that you need support with, or if someone needs to kind of jump on it straight away in the local community, or if who is it in estates who can go and, you know, clear up some fly tipping if you've spotted it while you've been out doing an estate walkabout. So that team of teams approach, and really focusing on decision making at front of at the front line. I've just seen the message come through from Kathy. Our patch size is around about 500, and admittedly, I don't know if 500 is the right number. What I do know is that 2 years ago, the average size was about 750, 800. And in some areas of the country about 1,200, which is just too much. And since we want to get round to see our customers every 12 months, they've not got hope in hell of being able to get around all of those customers and build relationships with that number of properties. So what we've worked out is with 500, if you take off all the non-working days like weekends and holidays and all that sort of stuff, it's a couple of visits a day. So it's not beyond the wit of man to be able to kind of go and do that. But the things that we need to do in order, and we have done, to take some stuff away from our community housing managers to give them that capacity. And the other thing I just sort of mentioned in terms of culture is leaders. So leaders can either kind of, enhance or impede culture. And we've gone through a significant amount of leadership development across every level, from frontline leadership right through to our exec and board level. And part of that has been really instilling, bringing to life our people promises, our customer standards, showing what good looks like, and celebrating what good looks like as well on platforms such as Viva Engage. We use Viva Engage a lot, and as someone who came to the organisation not having used social media a huge amount before that, it's a big thing at PFP, and I think Microsoft have said that we're one of the biggest users of it. We've got about 60-70% engagement in Viva Engage, and we share lots of examples of when people have run through the line, when people have jumped off the raft, when people have got, people will press the big red button as well on Viva Engage, the proverbial red button, and highlight if they're not getting any success with something and teams aren't helping, they'll call it out on Viva Engage, and we really encourage that.
Excellent stuff. No, I think to be honest, a couple of those points that you mentioned there are in the white paper themselves, and there's I suppose section 5 is all based on staff empowerment and making sure that they've got the belief from both leaders, as you said, to go out there and actually do that. But on top of that as well, they've got the reassurance that that they can go out there and do what they need to do in order to make sure that they get the right result, I suppose, and can work with customers really well. And one of the routes that we're seeing more in terms of customer engagement is through Facebook, through Instagram, through LinkedIn, and actually collating that information. And I suppose there's examples of where organisations are taking that, sending a bulletin or sending a message through to the housing management team, so that they can understand what the sentiment is out there with customers and use that effectively. Great stuff. So I suppose we've only got around about sort of 5 to 10 minutes left. Final topic that we're going to be discussing, or certainly final point that we're looking to make, is around really best practice and what's actually working. And I suppose you have been running through this as we've been looking at this so far. But I suppose starting with you, Katie, Citizen, what are you doing that's working at the moment?
I think coming back to sort of some of the good stuff that works in terms of the surveys and making sure that they're getting out to the business, we're doing work off the back of that. Like I said, the TSM's following it up with kind of like detailed research. That's working. The other stuff that's working is obviously scrutiny is quite a well-oiled machine now. We've got a really good kind of scrutiny group, and sort of again got them to a stage where they really sort of understand their role and how that feeds through to the board. Those are sort of all like kind of the traditional things that are working well, because I think we've invested the time and the energy in those and sort of got, like I said, the skill sets and the resources around them to sort of manage them. I think that's a really key thing, is that if you're going to do something well, you've got to resource it well as well. So things like that are working fine. They're probably very similar to what everybody on the call sort of doing. Things that we're sort of dipping our toe in the water with now, we're trying to see if that actually this starts changing and informing different decisions and different insight, is that we're just in the process of setting up a customer procurement panel. Don't worry, it's not just the tokenistic thing where it's like I have a customer doing scoring with you. It's not that. We're trying to be a little bit different, to get them to understand when we do very, very big contracts, which is funnily enough when we put kitchens and bathrooms in, which are multi-million-pound contracts, get them to understand specifications, train them, get them to be involved in that. And I think we've had a panel of around about 25 customers, not already are involved customers. So we're looking at a completely different group of people to say, understand the decision making that we do to provide you a service and to make it better, so it's representative that your voice has been part of that. I know 25 is not a big number on the scale of things, but trying to do things a little bit differently with that. So that's one thing. We're also trying to look a little bit outside the sector as well. So working with contractors or working with suppliers where traditionally they don't work with housing. I'm sort of always of the view that I'm sort of less interested in what other housing providers do. Sorry, I know everyone on the call is a housing provider, but more interested in companies, like I said, the utilities, the water, telecoms, because they're massively regulated organisations, but they have to have a commercial view and deal with the same consumers as us. They've got exactly the same customers as us. So we're about to embark on some work with Equifax, looking at the segmentation, but maybe slightly different to some of the other segmentation. And we're quite interested to see sort of how we pull in sort of different open data and sort of models to sort of look at how our customers sort of behave. So that's something slightly new and seeing how that sort of benefits. And then the other thing that we're doing, which is slightly off kind of pieced in terms of what we're talking about, is that a few people have heard about Microsoft Fabric. So I don't know if you have. Microsoft Fabric is I'm going to do a very light touch on here. It's an end-to-end product. If you're a tech person, you'll know it's an end-to-end product that Microsoft has brought in. The idea behind it really is that you can use it as a platform to ingest data from all your systems and then deliver what you'd probably call off the back of it sort of Power BI dashboards. The beauty of it is that it's ingesting data from all your systems rather than having everybody sit there and knit data together and go, I've got you this figure, somebody over there in that team's got that figure. We're leading this project collectively because the purpose of it is to bring our data to one point, to have a single source of the truth. And the idea is as well is that linking it back to that culture and that data maturity bit that I started at the beginning was that the platforms that we want to create through the Power BI dashboards eventually is that data will become part of everybody's business. They'll all have their own dashboards, which are real-time data. You're not then going to be going to the team going, can you run me a report on this? Or can you run me a report on something else? And it's getting people to understand the right questions they need to ask to get data and insight out and linking it back to the customer voice. I know that was the original question, is that how do you get the customer voice through all that different data that we've got? So we're triangulating things like complaints data, triangulating it with repairs information, triangulating it with access data. So who are the customers that we can't access their homes? Why is that? And seeing the data in the round, rather than spending lots of time knitting reports together, having a product. It's not by no means a silver bullet, by the way, but a product that makes us more efficient to enable us to use and consume data better, which then helps us focus on the other things to do with customer voice. It helps us invest money and time into maybe having more engagement staff, maybe having more housing officers, so we can do that face-to-face engagement and that customer voice slightly differently. So I think it's coming from things in a slightly different way, looking at it through an efficiency lens, looking through a kind of an experience lens for customers, and then looking at it through a sort of more traditional kind of routes as well, in terms of getting your feedback in a good place, getting your structures for sort of your governance and your scrutiny panels and all of that. And I think it's just being really clear in terms of how those resources and how they actually overall for me and for the business link into your overall strategy. What are we trying to achieve at the end of the day? What are those objectives or those ambitions? And how does it all help us sort of execute that sort of single vision really for our customers and for our board to see that narrative and that journey really clearly for us?
Fantastic. I haven't heard of Microsoft Fabric, so that's really interesting for me to hear, and I'm sure for everybody here today as well. So thanks for that, Katie. And same question over to you, Rachel, as well. I suppose what are you seeing over at Places for People, or what are you doing that I suppose is best practice?
So just a couple of things actually. One is around we did a load of research around kind of the impact of planned investment programs on customers when they're at home. You know, kitchens, bathrooms, and customers were telling us it's really disruptive, and it is. You know, if you're close to that, it can be really disruptive. Sometimes customers need to move out of their homes for periods of time, or if they're in their homes, then you've got wiring everywhere and plaster off walls, etc. All your decoration is kind of damaged, and for customers with particular vulnerabilities, that is really, really disruptive, even more so. So taking that feedback on board, we worked with some customers, including our national customer group and some of our regional customers, our customers from regional customer groups, and we've developed a new way of doing some of our kitchens. So like a plug and play type approach where you don't need to do so much wiring. And we've got a relationship with Magnet to have some particular specification of cupboards and configurations, where we're now doing this kitchen program in a couple of days to get a new kitchen, as opposed to a week or so, much less disruptive. And what we've done is we've used our PFP Thrive Academy to train the operatives in how to do this new way of a kitchen fitting, and we've recruited customers from within the community as well. So we've got customers who are trained up to fit kitchens in this new way that has been shaped by customer voice, and it's having a business benefit as well, in terms of A, it's cheaper to fit kitchens in that way, and B, you can get more done in a year because it takes less time. So it's a kind of win-win-win situation. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And more on PFP Thrive, we've I mentioned about the re-establishing our community housing managers as those kind of anchors and the relationship managers with customers. So we've created a new apprenticeship. It's a level 3 CIH, which is a precursor for the level 4, level 5 professional standards, which is 15 modules, a third of which are specifically around customer relationship management and customer service, and accredited by the Institute of Customer Services. So really baking in customer service from the very beginning of that that colleague journey, or baking it into existing employee work. And a lot of that practice around those 5 modules is now sprinkled across all of the courses that we offer within PFP Thrive. So really trying to kind of encourage our people in their training and their professional development to think about the customer first, in how we're doing things, from as basic as making sure that you ask if you need to take your shoes off when you walk into their home, and checking that it's okay to move something because it might have an impact on that particular individual that you wouldn't expect. So those are, I'm conscious of time, so those are just a couple of examples. Hopefully they were helpful.
Extremely helpful, extremely helpful. And again, I think from what you both said there's a lot to go off, and some excellent insight as to what's working out there in the sector as well. And if I'm completely honest with you, I think, within the white paper itself, we've covered a lot of different bases as to what's covered in that. And yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time today to discuss that with us, because yeah, it's a document that we're proud of, and having spoken to you both again in a lot more detail about this, I think it is something that really does resonate across the sector and from what we're seeing there as well. So just before we finish, I suppose finally to Rachel and Katie, a huge thank you for being involved in this. And as I say, your insights have been extremely valuable. If you did ask a question today, but you haven't had this answered, don't worry, we will come back to you on these and yeah, speak offline about it all as well. If you haven't received a copy of the white paper and you'd like that delivering, please do get in touch with myself or anybody in the team, and we'll be able to send you over a copy. And similarly, if you want to keep the conversation going, do follow us on LinkedIn and email search. But on that point, I think it's a good time to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you found that insightful. And yeah, we'll catch up with you all soon. Cheers all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave.
Amen.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thank you.
Bye.